So what esoteric antithesis, and I can't look, now you got me doing
I
it.
got him. Hi, welcome to Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. I'm your host with the most, your GM, Jared. And today I'm joined by Steve.
Yep.
And we're going to take a look at the Pathfinder playtest character, the Thaumaturge, in the Dark Archives playtest. So, the Thaumaturge is an interesting class. They are a martial class, but their specific key ability is charisma. And they start with 8 plus your con hit points, which is really cool. I'm going to toss it over to Steve to talk about the rest of the doobly-doos.
So they start with, and we'll go over their starting proficiencies. They get expert in perception. Well, not many classes get expert in perception.
Mm-hmm.
They're trained in both fortitude and reflex saves, and they're expert in will, similar to the psychic. They're also trained, get this, arcana, nature, occultism, and religion. And they're also trained in a number of skills equal to 2 plus their intelligence modifier. They're trained in all simple, martial weapons, and also unarmed attacks. They get trained in light armor, medium armor, and unarmored. And they're trained in their own Thaumaturge class DC.
Be awkward if you weren't. So the Thaumaturge brings in a new type of magic.
It's not really magic. It's more like...
It's like, garlic makes vampires go... and silver will stop a were creature. So it's
kind of.
So it's called Esoterica. And this is where the entire class is built off of this. The Esoterica. Basically, if you've ever seen the movie The Mummy or Hellboy, we were just talking about Hellboy. But like in Hellboy has like different bullets that will hurt different monsters, or if different reliquaries that will help them. In the Ron Perlman Hellboy, the only Hellboy out there movie, Hellboy has that charm that brings that dead dude to life to help him.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what this is, like the Esoterica. It's you have charms and talismans and doodads,
and they do weird things.
And that's the whole class. You're more or less, so this class is common, unlike the psychic, which was an uncommon class. This is a common class.
Similar to how the investigator gets the ability to devise a stratagem, where they get this one action ability which kind of boosts them up.
Mm-hmm.
They also have this ability called find flaws, and it's a once per round thing that they get to do, and you can determine a creature's weaknesses, whether a literal weakness or a metaphysical one. So, like you said, vampires have a clear hatred and reaction to garlic, but they may also have like that metaphysical hatred of crosses. So it doesn't have physically do anything to them, but they're still afraid of it, and you make them afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you make a recall knowledge roll about the creature using your charisma modifier, which is unusual because normally you use the stat that's particular to that skill.
Yeah, so intelligence for arcana and wisdom for or wisdom for religion.
Yep. But you get to swap out your charisma modifier, and you for the skill that you're using, recall knowledge, the creature must either be one you can see or specifically investigating. The result depends on your recall knowledge check. So you make a recall knowledge check, you're going to get some information based on the recall knowledge. You're also going to get some successes based on using this ability as well. So if you get a critical success, you learn all the creature's resistances and weaknesses and immunities. If you would have learned any of them already from your recall knowledge, you learn a different information about the creature. So it's kind of like stacking a check on top of another check, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then it states you can use your esoteric antithesis without spending an action, but that's the ability we're going to get to in just a little second. So the success is, instead of learning all of that information, you just learn the creature's highest weakness, if they have any. If you've learned that already, you get a different information instead, and you can then use your esoteric antithesis without spending an additional action. Failure, you couldn't quite figure it out, so you decided to invoke a wide range of superstitions and narrow it down from there. You can use your esoteric antithesis as your next action.
Yeah.
Critical failure, you came up with the wrong information and nearly made a critical mistake, distracting yourself You became flat-footed until the beginning of your next turn, and you can't use Esoteric Antithesis this round.
That's really interesting. The failure in my head is you're looking through a bunch of charms from like the Mummy.
Yeah.
And you're like,
You know, all the different religious symbols to try to find the right one that's not going to get him killed.
Yeah. So that's your Esoterica. That's your
that's your find flaw. You're trying to find the flaw into the monster that you're fighting.
And
actively.
that's why you have that Esoterica, is like you have all these different charms and gadgets and dabs on you. Now, there's also another thing I really want to talk about. And this class is really interesting. This class gets dubious knowledge for free, and you gain an additional lore skill if you already had dubious knowledge. So sometimes some backgrounds give you dubious knowledge.
Yeah.
And then if you already have it, you gain an additional lore skill. And it's just any lore skill you want.
Yeah.
So you could be like alcohol lore. I don't know why you want it, but you could take that. That's interesting. That they get dubious knowledge, because not many other classes get a free feat at first level. Some of them get like free, like fighters get
a first level feat.
Fighters get a like a skill. Like you could be trained in athletics or that, but they don't really get like a lot. Like
rogue. This is like a little bit of rogue dipped in here that they get one free skill feat.
Yeah, rogues are the ones that get it at level 1. That you can get a free skill feat early on. Yeah. So that's interesting. Now Steve brought this up a number of times. It's the Esoterica antithesis. The
Esoteric Antithesis.
There you go. That word.
All right. So the requirements are you used Find Flaw, and Find Flaw allowed you to use this. So you can't use it otherwise. So you have to first use the Find Flaw, and you have to not get a critical failure. So depending on how well you did on your Find Flaws, if you crit success, you don't have to burn an additional action. You just basically get it as a free action.
Yeah, or a success.
You're right. Success or critical success. You basically get it as a free action. If you get a failure, you have to spend an action, but you're allowed to use it if it's your next action. And critical failure, you just can't use it this turn, and you got to wait.
You're bad at your job.
But remember, you critically failed, so you're going to get some dubious knowledge from that anyway. So it's not at all loss.
I mean, it's not terrible, but actually, no. I think dubious knowledge is like a critical fail. It's like all dubious.
Maybe you're right. Maybe
it's all dubious.
It's all dubious. So we're going to talk about Esoteric Antithesis. So once you used Find Flaws and you were allowed to use this ability, whether you failed, succeeded, or critically succeeded, you basically interact with some specific and various symbols on you and talismans and whatever little things and bones and feathers, whatever you have, to find the specific weakness for this enemy. Your unarmed weapon, you rub it all over your weapons, and you rub it all over your hands and everything. Your weapons and unarmed strikes against the creature become magical if they weren't already. Cause them to apply one of the creature's weaknesses if they had one, even if they don't deal the correct type of damage. If the creature has a weakness, with a value of 2 plus half your level or higher, set the type of weakness to the creature's highest weakness. So basically, if they have a weakness that meets the threshold between your level plus 2, half your level plus 2, your weapon basically acts as that kind of weakness.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you create a custom weakness with a value of 2 plus half your level.
What?
Yeah. So either they have a weakness, and you're basically, if they have a weakness, and it kind of matches that threshold of 2 plus half your level, your weapons act as if your weapons were that weakness, whether it's law or good or cold iron or silver, whatever the case is. If they don't have a weakness that meets that threshold, you create a new weakness for them that only applies to you, but it's 2 plus half of your level. This weakness only applies to your strikes. For example, against a tyrant, you might attach a chain broken to free a captive. This effect lasts until you find flaws again. So it stays around until obviously the creature is no more, or you find flaws again. Say something changed and you need to change targets. You find flaws again. Your current Esoteric Antithesis ends, and your new one may begin if you make the high enough check.
That's so cool. Like real talk. That's so cool because like they say tyrant, right? And that's a cool one. That's a very flavorful one, right? Like you chose a tyrant, and you're using the chains of a broken, free person. which is cool. But in my head, I was just like, oh, because I was thinking, I was like, oh man, like what if you're fighting like a viper, right? Vipers don't have real weaknesses. Like if you look in the monster
And
manual,
all of a sudden you pull out from your little bag of tricks like a hawk claw or something.
or yeah, like you grab like mongoose musk, and you like you're like, oh, this is it, and that's their weakness, is because like snakes don't like mongooses, right? Like that's
But yet again, this is why it's not necessarily a physical weakness, but also gonna be a metaphysical weakness, what they're afraid of.
Yeah, so like a mongoose would like scare them, and then you're like, I got mongoose musk, smash, and then you're like stab, and you cause weakness. And remember, weakness, if you don't know, we're gonna jump into the rules real quick with Steve. What does weakness do?
So anytime an enemy or a target is hit with something that they are weak to, let's say something like a giant or a fire elemental is weak to cold damage, and they're weakness cold 5, right? Anytime they take cold damage, even if it's a single point, they take that damage plus their weakness. So even if it only is weakness 5, and I do 1 point of cold damage to you because I threw a snowball at you, you're going to take 6 points of damage.
Yep. So applying 2 plus half your level, so at level 1 it's 3, you're dealing 3 plus whatever damage you deal to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hit that viper, with my greatsword, because we were talking about greatsword. We'll get into that in a second. With my greatsword, that's 2d6.
D12.
I mean, sorry, old school Pathfinder game. So yeah, I'm playing with a greatsword. I deal a d12. I deal 5 points plus 3.
Plus your strength.
Plus my strength. Now me and the barbarian are wrecking house.
Mm-hmm.
So come see me. So that is basically kind of the beginnings of the thaumaturge.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is your implement. And I love this because I really like one of the implements a lot for no reason. So the implements are basically like a special tool that has some kind of it's important to you. So it has some symbolic reason for your character.
Mm-hmm.
So they go through a number of them, and I'm just going to list them off real quick because I kind of memorized them a little bit. And let's see if I get them all right. Ready? So this is my test.
Okay.
So you have your amulet, which can be like a family relic or something.
Mm-hmm.
You have a chalice. You have a lantern. You have your weapon. And you have a wand.
Yep, you got them all.
Yeah. So basically, wand, is like it's a wand, whatever it wants to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Weapon, and it could be any weapon, right? So it's not like, it's a one-handed weapon. We were just talking about like two-handed weapons and how would that work with Esoterica? And it specifically says, you just use it.
You can use it with your
weapon.
If your weapon is your implement.
Yeah, if your
specifically.
Yeah. So
if you choose a different implement, it can't be in both your hands. You have to have one hand free to be able to use esoteric,
Esoterica,
esoteric antithesis.
Yeah.
You need a free hand unless that you're having something in two hands that is also your implement and your weapon.
Yeah. So you could do a greatsword build or two-hand weapon build with this. I love the chalice because I just want to beat someone up with a mug. I think that's hysterical, and just call myself Mugs.
Mugs.
And that is the name of my halfling thaumaturge that I'm now building, and they're just called Mugs. But yeah, so what does your implement do, Steve?
All right, so you begin play with a mundane type of whatever item it is. So the idea is that you generally are not allowed to sell this item, and
like a mug.
But as you continue, you'll be able to collect up to 3 implements and also unlock additional benefits for some of your implements. Let's see, we can go over.
So I could have 3 mugs.
You have to pick when you get a new implement. It must be different than the ones you already possess. So you can't have 3 mugs. You can have like an amulet, a mug, and a weapon. You can have a wand, an amulet, and the mug.
Oh,
so,
lantern.
Lantern, yeah.
Did I say lantern?
Yeah, I think you did say lantern.
Did say
if not, he said it now. So it's good.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like that's kind of cool. I am surprised They do talk about it, but I'm surprised that and I know I'm jumping around because I really like the Thaumaturge, but I'm very much surprised. Like, they could add this in later, but like the cards weren't involved because the Harrowing deck, or like game, like a game of like games, like dice or something like that, like
chips.
You could call it like games. Could be your implement. And it would be like the Harrowing cards or dice or something like that. I think that would be a cool change. I don't think they're going to add something like that in, because they have a lot of implements.
Yeah, they even said here that in this little kind of sidebar that the Thaumaturge is strongly linked to symbolism both in the real world and fantasy about divination via cards or reading stars. And they even mentioned that the Harrow deck, which is basically the Tower of Pathfinder, the Cosmic Cavern, which is an astrological zodiac, also the Dragon Empire zodiac, which is a popular across Tianzai. So a lot of the feel of these things are kind of built into the Thaumaturge, but this is also a playtest, so that stuff may be in the works.
Yeah.
And it may have even more implements. So the implements all gain an initial benefit, and as you gain in higher levels, you get to choose if you're going to increase one of your implements to get a better effect. And there's basically 3 levels of each implement. There's the initial benefit, the adept, and the paragon benefit.
Yeah.
We're not going to go into all of them. You can go ahead and go to download the playtest, but they're all really cool. I do kind of like the Chalice one where you get to drink from it and you get to choose where you sip from it or you just down the whole thing.
Yeah, and it does give you
different benefits
on like, so I mean we could talk about the initial benefit.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Chalice.
Let's say you're playing with Muggs, right? So Muggs joins your party, you and Muggs hang out, and Muggs is like, "Hey, we're in the fight, and for a single action, I'm like, cool, I have my drink from the Chalice. It's a single action. Once per round, so we can keep this going. And I have to be holding my implement, which is my mug, and Muggs doesn't give up his mugs.
Yeah. Well, the idea is if you have multiple, you have to pick which one you have out, and then you can swap them.
Yeah. So if you were to take a sip from Muggs's mug, a sip grants the drinker an amount of temporary hit points equal to 2 plus half your level that lasts until the end of your next turn, which is really cool. Now, which is really nice because like if someone goes down, you technically can rest them with temporary hit points.
I'd have to double check on that, but that might be a thing.
You might be able to keep people up slightly. Just like, hey, dude, you got 1 round. You better find the potion or run. Or you can drain my whole mug. And Muggs is friendly. Muggs be more than happy to let you drink deeply of their mug. So when you drain the mug, the drinker heals 3 hit points for each level you have. After the chalice is drained, it's left only with only its slowly collecting dredges. The chalice can't be drained again, though it can still be sipped from. If 10 minutes pass without anyone drinking, the chalice magically refills itself.
Basically, you're refocusing.
You refocus your chalice, which is really cool because then that is the way you give someone. If you can't give them temps to res them, correct, I could give them full hit. I could give them 3 hit points per level.
The interesting thing about this, which I think is a slight note that they didn't have to put in there, but is when you're offering it to somebody else, obviously you have to be adjacent to them.
Yeah.
It's the drinker's choice whether they drink, they sip it, or they drain the whole mug. I always thought it's like only take a sip. No, I'm taking the whole thing.
Yeah, and I like how they're like it just magically refills.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I like that. That's fun. So that's what you get from the chalice. I just think it's fun to beat someone up with a chalice because that's an improvised weapon, and I am trained in improvised weapons.
I just want to go over the adept effects of the chalice just because I think that it's hilarious.
Yeah.
If you take piercing or slashing damage from a foe's critical hit or take persistent bleed damage on your next turn, drinking from the chalice grants greater effects. On the simp, the temporary hit points increase to your charisma modifier plus your level. On draining, it increases to 4 hit points per level you have. So a little bit of blood spills in, helps the mug fill up a little bit.
I guess Muggs has a delicious blood.
It's constantly bleeding into the mug again.
So it's a lot of really interesting things that you could get from the implement. Once you get the implement, you could start to make it stronger as you go, and it's really fun. As you progress in levels, at 5th level, you get your 2nd implement, and then later on, you would get your 3rd, which is really fun because that also allows for a lot of diversity in the way you play.
The other interesting thing is that the implement's empowerment, the power of your implement can also be turned into a rather common task of combat, as its power flows into your weapon or your fist. When you strike, you can trace mystical patterns with an implement you're holding, or a free hand to empower your strike. When you trace these patterns, you get a 2 additional damage on your strike. And this damage goes up, and it gets better at 4 damage, 6 damage. So as you level up, it gets more damage. So it's an interesting way of, you can even be like drawing symbols and sloshing around your chalice and then stab somebody, and you do a little extra.
And that's on top of my weakness that I might have given them.
Mm-hmm.
So off the bat, I'm dealing, what is it, 2?
Oh, yeah. I think it starts off as 2 damage plus the weakness, which is 2 plus half your level.
So 3, so that's 5. I'm dealing 5
plus your strength,
plus my strength, plus my strength. That's very powerful. Yeah, that is a very powerful strike.
Keep in mind though, with this particular ability, if your implement is not your weapon, you still need a free hand to kind of draw these symbols. So if you're using a 2-handed weapon, it's going to be a little harder for you to kind of pull this off.
Yeah.
But that's the part I was reading that makes it more difficult.
Yeah,
for that.
but you might, if you're thinking going 2-handed, then you might want to make your weapon, your implement at level 1. And then that kind of negates that.
Yeah.
Which I feel they really shows how much.
Oh yeah, with your implement you're holding. Yeah, you wouldn't have to do that. Yeah.
So they it again shows how far they've gone in thinking the playtest out.
Here's an interesting thing I actually found here. As you gain certain class features, you get to pick a training in one of the 4 skills that you learn. So arcane, nature, divine, or occult, and just increase it.
Yeah.
So you're also going to be spending skill points as you level up, but these also say, a thaumaturgic master, you gain the master in your DC, but you also gain an additional skill increase, which you can apply only to one of the 4 that we just mentioned: arcane, nature, occult, or religion.
I mean, that is at 17th level, but
no, but that it happens before as well.
Does.
So thaumaturgic expertise
at 9th level, it pops up. It happens a few times.
Yeah, so you're getting extra skills on top of you're already getting skill points.
Yeah,
so
which is nice. I mean, because if you're building, let's say you're playing a very spooky campaign, and you're dealing with a lot of ghost and then Cthulhu-esque, Lovecraftian monsters. So you might have, as you progress, you're raising religion, and then you're also raising occultism to constantly get those checks done. And at high enough levels, you might be legendary in both of them, or possibly all 4.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting take on. This is really I'm almost getting vibes of, in 1st edition, bards get bardic knowledge, which basically was a skill that they could roll against almost anything.
Yeah.
This is how I feel that they took that class feature and threw it into the thaumaturgist, and they gave him a whole bunch of cool abilities around it.
Not mad at that. Not mad.
Yeah. Almost similar to Hellboy. Hellboy just knows stuff about monsters.
Yeah.
And they have a whole book about it. He's like, no, I know that guy's weakness. Here it is. And he puts a bullet in there. Blam.
So now we're just going to jump into some feats that we were looking at as we ran through the playtest characters. So I'm going to talk about the scroll thaumaturgy. This one's really cool. I think it's a solid choice.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, going over the rules real quick, if you're trying to cast from a scroll, you either need, and you're casting without having that school of magic, you can't.
Yeah, so to cast from a scroll, you need to use the cast a spell activity, which only is granted to people who are granted that by their class, most likely spellcasters.
Yeah. And it has to be part of your spellcasting school.
Yes.
And so if I'm an occult, if I'm
cast occult magic and it's divine and it's not on the occult list,
I can't do it. I can't do it. Or I have the trick magic item feat.
Yep.
Which allows you to trick the magic item. Scroll thaumaturgy is basically trick magic item for scrolls, but guaranteed. It literally guarantees. There's no skill check. So you can activate a scroll of any magical tradition, which is very powerful because remember we said it had to be on your spell thing. They don't have spells. So they could just be like, I'm going to read this divine scroll and then this occult one. And then just for a good measure, this primal. Using your thaumaturge class DC for the scrolls DC rather than a particular spell DC, which is even more powerful.
Yeah.
Because let's say it's a 1st level spell the DC is my thaumaturge.
Mhm.
So it doesn't even matter. I could cast that first level spell, and that DC, if I'm 20th level, it's a 20th level DC.
Yeah.
It's not a low level 1 DC.
Mhm.
I think that might be a bit too powerful.
You're still using a consumable, and you still have to use, for the most part, 2 actions to cast the spell.
Yeah, that's true.
And the DC thing only takes into part if the spell has a DC component.
Mhm.
So say if it's a spell attack roll here, or if it's just a general buff spell.
Yeah, that's true. Bless or
something like that. So if it doesn't have a DC, then you don't really gain the benefit from that, but you're still being able to cast a spell from a scroll. So yeah, it's solid.
It's a solid choice. And this is a first level feat. Now, Steve, we flipped the coin, and Steve graciously won. I feel is just bananas.
I think this is cool. Yet again, these both are really awesome first for level 1 options.
Yeah.
It's called Root to Life, and it's either a 1 or 2 action activity. And it's got a whole bunch of traits I'm not going to get into. And it says, basically, use primal traditions to connect flowers and plants with a boundary between life and death. And you can leverage this connection to keep an ally on your side of the line. You place a small plant or a similar symbol adjacent to the creature, immediately stabilizing them. At the creature, they are no longer dying and instead is unconscious at 0 hit points. If you decided to spend 2 actions instead of 1, you will empower the act further by uttering a quick folk blessing to chase away ongoing pain, adding an additional auditory trait to this action. When you do so, you attempt flat checks to remove any source of persistent damage on the affecting target. Due to this particularly effective assistance, the DC is 10 instead of 15. This is awesome, especially if you're dealing with a lot of persistent damage. If someone has persistent damage, they're going to get hit again, and they're going to go down again.
Mhm.
You can, and yet again, now you're taking a 25% chance to remove an effect to a 50% chance.
Yeah.
Even a slightly better than 50% chance.
Yep.
So we're going to go a little bit higher level. And one of the feats that I picked, which I think is honestly ridiculous, at feat level 4, it's called One More Activation. You forge a deeper connection with your invested items, allowing you to activate them more than usual. Once each day, you can activate an item you've invested, even after you've used the activation the maximum number of times of its frequency. So you can do this only if the item's level is half of your level or lower, the frequency of once per day or more, and you haven't already used this activation each round. So you can actually use this once per day per item, I think, is the way it reads. So if I have 3 items that have a once per day activation, then they're all meet the level requirement. Say if I have a
Wand of Healing.
Okay, I used it before. I tap someone again with that. I don't have to overcharge. I don't have to risk destroying the wand. Let's say I also have a thing that my shield can do once a day.
Mhm.
Or say I have a rune on my armor that lets me fly.
Yeah, once a day.
Like once a day, and it meets the level requirement. I could just use it again. So yeah, it's very simple, and it's
Powerful.
how many times you're like, oh man, if I can only use this one more time.
Yeah.
This is the one more time.
What was it, like the boots of striding and jumping that they get like that once per day?
Or even lifting belt. You want to lift something really heavy? You could do it one more time.
Yep. So I'm jumping up a little higher than Steve. I'm taking the 6th level feat, and it's the rule of 3. This is a single action, kinda. And when I say kinda, it's because of how it works. So the way it works is you know the power of the number 3, right? And there's a lot of flair to this feat. Now, the first thing is you have to have used Find Flaw. The moment you use Find Flaw, you technically have activated Rule of 3, because the first utterance of the Rule of 3 to take effect, it just says there's no benefit if you've used Find Flaw in the presence of the creature that you're using this on. It just counts as the first rule, as the first utterance.
Yeah. So, but you can use Find Flaws while you're tracking or investigating a thing, so that wouldn't count in this sense.
Yes. So it has to be specifically the creature that you're hunting,
and
it's right there, and you can see each other. So you do that, and then your first action, Find Flaws, bang. Next action, Rule of 3. bang, that's 2 action on my turn, and then maybe my third action is, I
Take a swing.
take a swing, or I drink from my mug. Mug drinks from their mugs. They take a sip. My second round, right? So this is the thing I like. This isn't sustained. This isn't anything like that. It's not concentration. It just happens. So the next round is my second utterance. I gain a +1 status bonus to attacking that creature. And the status bonus is important because that stacks with circumstance bonus. So I could theoretically get a +1 and a +1, which stacks to a +2. And finally, and this is the reason why this is really powerful. Third utterance, I get a +2 status bonus. So again, powerful. But the creature is flat-footed.
Yep.
Against my attacks. That is a +4 swing. Because it's a +2 to me, and the armor and the AC drops by 2.
Mm-hmm.
So it just goes woof, and then, it's flat-footed, and now someone casts, someone does something to help me gain a circumstance bonus.
And remember, you're already on, to use this feat, you're already under the esoteric antithesis, so it's already weak to your attacks.
Yep.
And you already know its weaknesses. You're already doing some nasty stuff to it. And like I said, if the first time you use it, it's in its presence and you can see it and it can see you, you've already done the first part already.
Yeah.
Basically for one action. And then you use the next turn, because you can only use this once a turn.
Yep.
Once a round. You use that second action, you're technically already on the second one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, it's still a +1 is still solid. And if you crit, plus it's weak, plus you're doing maybe extra damage because you draw those symbols with your implement.
Yep.
And you've infused your implement. This is just a lot of damage.
Yeah, you're just unloading.
Yep.
You're unloading a lot of damage, and it's just very powerful. There's a lot of other cool things, right? Like you could take a familiar at level 1
Mm-hmm.
and build your character out. I really like this. That really.
But this only does affect you, so this is why it does take multiple actions to get to its full effectiveness.
Yeah.
But sometimes that fight's going to be a little bit of a slog, and this is just going to be able to amp that up just a little bit more.
Yeah, and remember, keep finding flaws.
Yep.
Just do it. Just find them flaws.
Yeah, it's not using a pool. You don't have a limited number of spell slots to use it. It just happens when you want to use it. When you have that, there's how many times have we said, man, I have this one action. I don't know what to do with this one action.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
the first thing. That's the first thing that you do. Is I already found flaws last turn, and then this turn I go, okay, well, I'm going to do rule of 3. Bam, I've already gotten my first utterance. Okay, now I'm gonna hit it right, and then the next turn it's like, oh, second time. Well, now I have +1. Now what are you gonna do? Yeah, I'm gonna do it one more time.
Gonna hurt it bad.
Yeah.
And or I'm gonna move into a better position,
Yep.
or I'm gonna get the high ground.
Yeah, or maybe if you're already standing next to it and it really feels it wants to go to toe with the one thing that knows all of its weaknesses, you're gonna just swing twice, or take other feats to just do
bounce. Keep
trip
bouncing.
it, just make it even worse.
Yeah, you make it bad.
Make it bad.
So closing thoughts on the thaumaturge, Steve.
It's diametrically opposed to the psychic. As far away as you can, because look, we had the magus and the summoner, and they were kind of related because they had spell casting, and one's more of martial, and one's more of a pet summoning class.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the in Guns and Gears, we had the gunslinger and the inventor. So they're kind of still both kind of using guns or equipment, and they're using it in a different way.
Yeah.
One's using gears, one's using guns, but they're still
technology.
related in some way using technology. These are literally opposite ends of the pole here.
Yeah.
And it's a nice that a book's going to come out that gives you the birth of, look, I want to play this weird thing where I'm just pulling out all these talismans and weird things. And then the other person's like, I'm going to use my mind bullets to strike you down. So I think they're both awesome.
Yeah. I really like the thaumaturge. I love the character art. We spoke about that in the psychic. This character art is awesome. I love Mios, I believe is the name of this character. I think Mios is an awesome character. They are the artwork for this is again fantastic. We were just looking at it. I believe Mios is probably a high level character. So they have 2 implements. It looks they have a lantern and
It could be their weapon.
a weapon because they are holding a lantern.
Yes, they are holding a lantern.
Yeah, and then they are holding the weapon.
Yeah,
So
but a weapon could be another implement. They could be wearing an amulet underneath that.
Yeah, and if you look at the artwork, there's this one cool thing that struck out. They're wearing a wolf pelt or some kind of animal pelt in all the armor. And I was like, that's a werewolf pelt. In my head, Mios killed the werewolf, skin it, and now put the pelt on. I know that's probably not it, but that's my headcanon. Thaumaturge is my favorite class. Hands down, I think it might be actually too powerful. I think it might be too powerful.
Maybe, but there is a lot of actions built up into this because if you only fail your find flaws check, you then have to spend another action. On the weakness, the esoteric antithesis. If you're taking rule of 3, that's 3 actions right there.
Yeah, you burn.
I think there's very action heavy, and you kind of have to pick your feats very carefully to make sure that you have all this cool stuff that you can't do because it's too many actions.
Yeah, that is 100% true. I just looking at just taking a step back, I was like, wow, it looks very powerful.
And then even the implements, some of them have actions as well.
That's true.
So you have a lot of ways. Some of the implements are reactions, some of them are actions.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful of what you choose to do.
Yeah, like the wand. The wand is two actions. You throw magic. So Steve, thumbs up.
Yeah, I think a thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All right, cool. So from all of us here at Nothing Ventured, Nothing Aim, we love rolling dice, giving advice with a little bit of that New York spice. Say goodnight.
Later.
Bye.